Join us for Maine Challenge, where we're going to talk about COVID-19 with Dennis Bailey, who's been there and done that. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on Maine Challenge today. I am Betsy Sweet, and as of today, I am going to be one of the rotating hosts for the Maine Challenge, along with Chuck Kruger, where we are going to talk about issues of importance and meet with important people and people doing amazing things to bring about the challenge of making sure that Maine is the best place to live and work and raise a family. So thank you for being with us. Today, we turn to COVID-19 because how could we not? Right? This past week, we've had a lot of bad news about the rising cases in Maine. We hit records every day of the number of people tested positive in Maine. All across the country, we see the numbers rising, the numbers of death rising, the numbers of people in hospitals, the shortage of PPE again that we had before, shortage of beds all across the country. So it is time to really talk about this and take this seriously. And we have the great honor to have with us today my friend and colleague from many years ago, Dennis Bailey. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so happy to see you upright and smiling. And just tell people a little bit. So Dennis is a partner in Savvy Inc., which is a public communications and a public publicity and communications firm, and lives in DC now, but has lived in Maine for most of his life. And you may remember him because he was the press secretary for Angus King. He and I, he was a reporter for Portland Press Herald. He and I did a lot of work together. We met, I think the first time we worked together was on Tom Andrews' congressional campaign, where we had a great big upset against the machine, which was really fun. And most importantly, Dennis is a dad, and he is an incredible musician and plays in a band, and most recently has spent quite a bit of time in the hospital as someone with COVID-19. So Dennis, thanks again for joining us. It's so good to see you up, my friend. Yeah. So tell us first, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's it going? How's the recovery? All of that.
It's actually going pretty well. It's slow for me. I'm impatient. I'd like to get going. I'd like to get out and sing. But actually, I'm not doing that badly. Just in the last couple of weeks, my lungs have recovered. I'm not using oxygen much anymore. I'm not getting winded. I can go for walks, which sounds like a simple thing, but just a few weeks ago, just rolling over in bed, I'd be out of breath. So
gosh, Dennis,
going for a walk is amazing.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
First time I went a few weeks ago.
Your chronicles in the, Dennis also, if you haven't read it, go to the Portland Press Herald and read about his journey, because it's awesome. It was so great for you to have chronicled that. So tell us a little bit, for people who haven't read it yet, just tell us a little bit about your journey and, just in a encapsulated version, what it's been like for you.
I've learned a lot. This is not the flu. Everybody still believes this is the sniffles or the flu. I've got news for you. It's not. I've had the flu many times. I'm a relatively healthy guy. I've never been in the hospital. Well, when I'm in the second grade, I guess I got my tonsils out, but I'm not. It came on, it was just, let me tell you the whole story. I was actually planning a trip to Wyoming with some friends, and this was in end of September. And I decided I better get a flu shot before I went. So I went to my clinic right here in Adams Morgan and got a flu shot. And the next couple of days, I didn't feel very good. I got a fever and scratchy throat, and I had weird body aches, which were unusual, and just in like my torso. I called my doctor, and she said it's just probably from the flu shot.
Yeah.
But over the next couple of days, I decided, since I'm taking this trip, I had a fever, I want to go get a COVID test, just to be sure. I didn't want to go to Wyoming and infect everybody. Yeah. And it came back positive. It kind of floored me. But for the next week, I was I was not feeling great. I had a fever. I was working still. I was getting around. It wasn't, I lost my appetite. I couldn't eat. I didn't lose my sense of smell or.
Oh yeah, because I thought that was one of the telltale signs.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So then by the end of the week, though, things went downhill. I really couldn't breathe, which I like breathing. And it was on Saturday, I called for an ambulance, and they came and they wouldn't take me. They said, well, you're not critical enough. You're speaking in full sentences and you're walking around. They just said, we could take you, but they'll send you home. So I said, okay. So, but the next morning I woke up and it was worse. I mean, I couldn't tie my shoes without just gasping for air. And I'd read an article about, how it infects your lungs and things. And I bought one of those little pulse oximeters.
Oh yeah, finger things, yeah.
And the normal range is 95%. I was down to 70%.
Yes.
That's when I knew things were bad, and I called the ambulance, and there was no debate this time. They put me on oxygen and sent me right into the emergency room. And then I was there I was in hospital for a month, and in the ICU for 2 weeks.
Oh, Dennis. So in all of this, first of all, so it took you by surprise, right? Because you had been sort of doing all the precautions and stuff. Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, the most frequent question I get is, how do you think you got it? And I don't know. I mean, I did everything right. I was wearing a mask. I kept my distance. I didn't go into restaurants.
Yeah.
I think maybe my elevator, I thought maybe I got it when I went and got the flu shot, that I got it at the clinic, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
But everybody was masked and taking precautions, and I don't know. I just luck of the draw.
Yeah, wow. Or the unluck of the draw, yeah.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
So Dennis, when you were there, I mean, through this whole thing, and this is sort of a big question, and it may not be even an interesting or fun one, but what to you seemed to be the hardest part? Was it the isolation? Was it not knowing? Was it, what was hardest for you?
I think the hardest, well, there were several parts of it. The isolation was a problem. I think it was not knowing. I mean, the knowledge base is still evolving. Yeah. So doctors can't give you they can't make you feel good, really. I mean, I would ask, like,
yeah.
And they're like, well, they really can't, because the nurses told me later that they'd seen so many, one nurse told me they had a 40-year-old guy, healthy guy, come in, he had COVID, they worked on him, and she came in the next day and he died. And they'd seen this repeatedly, that, people, and if there's one phrase I heard more than any other, it affects everybody differently. So some people come in and they're there for 2 or 3 days. Other people are on a ventilator for a month. You just don't, and there's no sort of rhyme and reason. They can't give you reassurance. I was always asking them, is this normal? is this the way it's supposed to be?
Yeah, right.
They're like,
what's going to happen next? Yeah.
Yeah. That was the sort of scary part. It was just,
to not know.
Any minute it could change, and you just didn't know.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, even at home, you had a couple of days where you were feeling fine, and then so it really, I think that's what we hear over and over again, is that the path of this is so unknown. But you talked a little bit about the nurses and in the hospital. I just want to talk. So there's been a lot of talk about the essential workers in this, and just this past week in New York, the nurses went out on strike because they didn't have access to enough PPEs. And so I just want, I don't know, I'm sure they were the people that you talked to while you were there, and no one else could. And they're just sort of their role, and what you think we need to be doing better for them. What was your experience with the essential workers?
I don't think people realize the issue with PPEs. I didn't realize it until I saw it in action. I'm in an ICU by myself. There's a big circulator thing going. It's a negative pressure thing, so when they open the door, air doesn't rush out, it sucks it back in. So it's like living with a jet engine. But the nurses, if I call the nurse, for example, if something's up, she has to bundle up. She has to put on the PPE, the mask, the hairnet, the everything, gloves, and she can come in for maybe 2 minutes, and then on the way out, she takes everything off and throws it away. the PPE goes into the garbage every time. So you have to, you can't, you know, I can't call them in for minor stuff.
See how they're doing.
Yeah, and they like to,
my goodness, come say hi.
I'm bringing in the meal, so I'll bring his medication, and you know, they don't want to go in 100 times, because every time they do it, there goes the PPE. They're really, I couldn't say enough about, you know, how good these people are and what they're doing and how much they're really willing to sacrifice and be on the front lines, because it's amazing. I mean, it's
oh, that's incredible.
This virus daily, constantly, and taking precautions, but they could get it, you know.
Yeah, right. You think of the thousands or millions of people who are serving in those roles, either as EMTs or nurses or doctors or janitors in the hospital, all of that. So, yeah.
I had a little bit of an issue with, I was at Howard University Hospital, just by luck of the draw, that's where the ambulance took me. And they were great. I don't want to say anything bad about it, but it was, it's very, a lot of immigrants, doctors, which is nothing wrong with that. But the problem was this circulator thing, and they're masked and they have accents. I had a hard time
understanding people.
I couldn't, I'd have to have them repeat it 100 times. Sometimes I didn't know if they were telling me I was going to die or I was
or you're doing well, or lift your head up, or whatever.
It's really difficult. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Well, so Dennis, I'm sure the irony of the fact that you and the president had COVID at about the same time is not lost on you.
No. And it was very off-putting to me to be sitting in a hospital bed struggling and really having this torturous time, and to see him on TV trying to act like it's nothing. Yeah, get over it in a couple of days. Well, you're lucky, and he probably got some medicine that I didn't get. You know, I don't know.
Well, no, I'm sure that's true. I mean, I think that, you know, to me, as watching it and knowing that you were there and other people that I know suffering with it, and then him to as you said, to really dismiss it, and you know, and just like to say it's nothing, and you know, to sort of give fuel to the fire of the people who say it's a hoax. You know, I'm sure for you it was a life-changing experience in lots of ways. You know,
well, my twin brother Doug, who was also a former journalist, he's in Boston, and he, you know, he was concerned about me, and he got really pissed off at the governor, at the president. And he ended up writing an article which was published in the Washington Post, you know, saying
it was awesome. It was really awesome. Yeah. Well, and so what is your? I mean, I am shocked every day by his policy indifference, and you know, him sort of, you know, I mean, now he's been, I mean, since the election, he's been MIA. You know, here we are, you know, and not allowing his team to work with Biden's team, you know, or anybody else, you know, allowing Steve Bannon to say Fauci should be beheaded and all of those things, right? It must just, it's horrible just as a political person, but I can imagine as someone who's political but also suffering, to hear that stuff must just put you through the roof.
It was infuriating, and really just went to his core of lack of empathy and lack of understanding. And you know, he looks at this thing as a political issue. You know, when it first started, it was all about, you know, this is going to hurt me, so he has to pretend it doesn't even exist, that it's a hoax. And he still was saying it's a hoax. Remember, at the end of the campaign, he was saying, you watch, after the election, no one will be even talking about it. Well, people are talking about it. I mean,
newsflash, right? Yeah.
He wanted to ignore it. He just wanted to go away, and instead of addressing it. And it is infuriating. It's double infuriating, let me tell you, when you're in there with double oxygen masks on, listen to this guy saying, you can over a couple days.
Oh my, I can't even imagine what that's like. And then also all the sort of anti-maskers, you know, the fact that, you know, there's people saying it's a hoax, and that, you know, I mean, I know you probably saw, but there was a nurse recently from, I think, North Dakota who quit because she was treating people in the ICU who were telling her to take off her PPE, that it was a hoax. And they're in the ICU fighting for their lives, and they're saying, it doesn't mean anything, you know. And how do you think, I mean, do you think we come back from the brink of making this a political issue, or getting this away from being a political issue?
I don't know how we got to this point where, and I'm going to be political here, but
yeah, please, no, please, that's what we're all about.
But how did we get to this point where people don't believe scientists, they don't believe economists, they don't believe journalists, and they believe a reality TV star has a record of fraud and abuse, and and he's the guy people listen to. I can't explain it. It's cult-like. It's just all the truth and all the facts mean nothing, and it's like, I believe in Donald Trump, and he's a bad influence on people. I have relatives that just believe him, and they're not going to believe the truth and the facts, and I just think anybody who doesn't wear a mask is just being incredibly selfish and really just plain foolish. I mean,
yeah. It must be. I mean, it must be. I just think of how infuriating it must be. But I do think that, this idea that we don't believe, often in the past, right? We'd say, well, the only thing that's going to bring this country together, and sadly, is a crisis. If 9/11 or, well, if this isn't a crisis, we have more people dying, and all of that stuff. It's like, so it's so unusual.
We have to retire the phrase, we used to say, avoid it like the plague, but people aren't avoiding it like the plague, You can't say that anymore.
Oh, right. And so it's like, what is that? You're a communications guy, a PR guy. Like, what could be the message that would get people to eat? Well, I mean, I think there's some anti-maskers we're never going to get. But for the people who are sort of, saying, well, this is invading my personal freedom, or, I can't be bothered. It's really not, this is not about me. What's a message that actually gets to them?
It's so illogical, their side, to me anyway, that I honestly don't know. I saw a video of a guy that was on an airplane. He was refusing to put on a mask, and everybody was yelling and screaming on him. And then the seatbelt light came on, and he puts his seatbelt on. What? It's like, how come the mask infringes on your constitutional right, but you put on the seatbelt when you're told to? I mean, and all these people going into Walmart and places, saying you're infringing on my rights, and there's a sign in the window that said no shirt, no shoes, no service. People abide by that. No one's claiming that that's abridging their right. I mean, that's why it's hard to come up with a communications that gets to people, because this is just nonsensical. It
seems to defy any kind of logic whatsoever.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, and you can't, I get infuriated by, I talk to some friends on Facebook from the right, and, they say something stupid, and I show them an article that totally refutes their position, and they'll go, oh, that's the New York Times. We don't believe that. It's like, what do you believe?
Well, and that's, I mean, in some ways though, Dennis, that's your strength, right? Because you've been there, done that, it's like, you can't, listen, buddy, you can't argue with me. I had the double oxygen masks on.
Right.
I was in the hospital.
I put a picture of my selfie on Facebook with me with the double oxygen mask on, and said, if you don't want to wear a mask, how about this mask? Try this one. That's where you're going to end up. It's sad. I don't know how public health and looking out for people became such a political issue. I don't.
Well, what? I think some of it. I'm curious what you think about this. Some of it is that sort of extreme individualism that I think we've gotten into. We've gotten so much into like, I'll take care of me. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of myself and my family, and that's what I. And sort of that sense of like, well, we're sort of in this together. It's so weird. Like, again, we've had crises that have pulled us together as neighbors and a country. And this one just seems to have, at least for some people, not everybody, obviously, but for a lot of people have just dug them in further. Yeah. And people are buying guns, and they're buying, and they're hoarding. And instead of being like, okay, so how can we address this together? Because the other thing that's infuriating, and I think for you probably too, is this isn't that hard to deal with. Like, it's hard to deal with individually, but like in New Zealand and in Vietnam, and there's countries where they just said, look, we're shutting everything down for 4 weeks. We'll give you all the money you need, or not all the money you need, but we'll make sure no one starves, everyone has money, and we're just going to shut it down. And they've had remarkable success. Yeah. But if we can't get people to define it as a problem.
Yeah. I mean, here they see it as a big, but I think it starts at the top. I mean, Trump has always, he accused somebody at a rally of wearing a mask, saying, "Oh, she's being politically correct." No, she's being smart and looking out for people and looking out for people's health. I mean, it's just, I don't know what to say. I mean, I don't think, I mean, as much as I'm glad that Biden is president, I don't know how he's going to reverse this kind of attitude that we have in this country.
Yeah, it is hard to think about how they're going to possibly, sort of like the genie's out of the bottle or whatever. And it's just going to be really hard to come back from this now. I agree with you. And I think, so the other thing is, so I'm assuming, and I shouldn't assume, but that you have health insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the other thing that I keep thinking about is this is stressful, really stressful if you have insurance or you have good insurance or, and I'm sure you're going to end up with lots of copays and stuff that are awful. But I can't imagine what this is like for people
Oh my God.
who, don't even have insurance.
I was sweating it as it is. I mean, I thought my insurance was pretty good and it would cover it. But they were giving me everything. They brought in remdesivir and convalescent plasma. And, they gave me some sort of steroid that was supposedly going to work. I can't pronounce. They were just heaping it on, and I was starting to get worried. Like, Jesus, as it turns out, I guess I'm going to be okay. I mean, I've got a few bills, but it's not going to put me under. But yeah, you're right. I mean, for some people, this thing would be devastating financially, economically. It just
Do you in?
And I don't want anything I say about my experience to diminish what so many other people have gone through and had it worse than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I got in there the first day, they wouldn't feed me or let me drink anything because my oxygen level was so bad. They just assumed I was going to be on a ventilator pretty soon. They wanted an empty stomach. And luckily I avoided it. They gave me all this medicine and my fingers came up after a couple of days. But some people have had it a lot worse, and because 250,000 people have died. So in that regard, I'm lucky.
Yes, but so do you worry, Dennis, about long-term impact?
Yeah,
I told you anything about that?
Yeah, I've got appointments coming up with a cardiologist. That's one thing that I don't think they've stressed enough in the coverage. They say it's a upper respiratory disease, and it is, but it's really a vascular disease. It affects everything. It goes after every organ in your body, bladder, heart, brain, whatever. I mean, it has long-term implications for anything. And the other thing I said in my writing was people should do everything they can to avoid it, like wear the mask and distance and all that stuff. The other thing they can do is get as healthy as possible, because if you get this thing, you're gonna it's a struggle, and you're gonna want, if you have underlying conditions, if you're overweight or have asthma or blood sugar, I mean, it makes it all much more complicated to take care of. People are dying of COVID, but a lot of them are dying because they're unable to fight COVID. I mean, they're in a condition that they're not able to fight it. That was one thing that because I had a heart issue when I was there. My pulse went up to 160 beats a minute.
I remember reading that.
They had to bring in the paddles.
Scary, huh?
That was one of the scary days. I asked the doctor when he was putting the paddles on me, I said, "Have you ever lost anybody in a procedure like this?" And he said, "Well, not me personally." I was like, wrong answer.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's really hard. I mean, again, as you were saying, that uncertainty of like not knowing exactly what's going to happen.
I'm in a position like, please lie to me.
Yeah, right. Just lie to me. Just say no. This is fine.
Oh, this is routine. They brought in the whole staff to watch it happen. Like I was a
little bit of a guinea pig. Let's see what happens to Dennis.
Yeah. It was like watching the car.
Oh, buddy. Well, I'm glad we can laugh about it.
I know.
Getting near the end.
I did want to say there was no, as far as I know, that's, I got to talk to the cardiologist, but they thought maybe I would develop AFib.
Yeah.
So far, there's
nothing
yet, but we're going to check it out.
All right, good. So in addition to taking care of yourself and staying away, any other piece of advice that you have before we go?
Well, you can't be too careful. I mean, you really can't. You can't like, oh, I'll just this once I'll, go to a restaurant with 50 people. You just, it can affect anybody, and it doesn't discriminate, and it's not worth taking chances with it. I mean, honest to God, I wish I knew how I got it. But
so you could avoid it and tell other people to avoid it.
I could have touched something. I ride the metro. I mean, but the metro, it's really clean. There's hardly anybody on it anymore. Everybody's in masks. I don't know. I just don't know.
It's hard to know.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to ask you the most important question. Have you written a song about this yet?
Not yet. I haven't. My brother's a better songwriter than me. Maybe we'll get together and write one.
The COVID rag or something. Really, There's got to be something, Dennis, that comes out of this. That's some positive thing. So.
Well, it is the whole COVID thing is going to have a big impact on life in general. I think going forward, I think it's the plague. It's going to impact lives for years to come. Even if they get a vaccine, it's going to be years before we crawl out of this thing.
Well, and hopefully we figure out a way to use it to bring us together and not drive us further apart.
And I think it starts at the top. I think Joe will be a better model or role model for this than we've had.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Dennis, for sharing your story. As I said, my friend, I am so happy to see you upright and feeling better and a little color in your cheeks. And please take it easy. Don't try and do too much too fast. So just take it easy. And
it's not a marathon.
Right, exactly. So thank you so much. And so to all of you, thank you so much for tuning in to the Maine Challenge. Please join us next week when Chuck Kruger will be hosting. And we are very excited about the next couple of weeks as we look back. We're going to be looking back on elections and what they meant. We're going to be keeping tabs on COVID. We will give you updates on Dennis and making sure that he's doing all right. And we are so grateful to have you join us. Thanks for this week. This is the Maine Challenge.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.